What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're here with Miss Irene Yvette. Now, she's been on the show before. If you go into our archives, you can see that. And we're going to have a conversation today about our children in public schools. And so many stories been coming out lately. You know, I really am an advocate against African-American children being in public schools just due to the racism and white supremacy, how they're treated daily. And we want to talk to Irene about it. So, Irene, it's good to see you again on the show.
It's good to see you too.
All right, so Irene, let's have this conversation. You know, I'm a big advocate for Black children not being in public schools for obvious reasons. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm wholly against it. I began homeschooling well over a decade ago. I have several children, but two of my sons have Asperger's, and when the younger of the two was preschool age, I started with speech therapy with the public school system. And that experience, along with an experience I had with my older child who had an interest in languages, and I was told it was better to have him take SHOP than to take multiple language courses at his school. Those two things started to push me away from the public school system. I just found they don't advocate well for Black youth. Their expectations are low for Black youth. They tend to want to medicate our children, and I really wanted to move my children out of that. So I definitely feel our young ones do not have any place in the public school system.
Okay, so you said you have two sons that were possibly being put in special education, correct?
So I had one child with Asperger's. I have two boys with Asperger's, but with the younger one, he wasn't speaking around the age of 3. It's something I didn't notice because we communicated well with each other. And so it was hard for me to recognize that he was being nonverbal. And so I had put him in speech therapy with our local school district. And at that same time, I also had a child in high school who was studying multiple languages. And I was trying to convince that school, these two things were running in tandem, that I wanted him to not take certain elective courses, and I wanted him to be able to take both French and Spanish. And kind of at the same time, I found that in the special education programs, a lot of the children were medicated. Obviously, if anybody who has a child with Asperger's or any type of autism knows that you are linked with your local regional center. And so I found the children were heavily medicated. They were often staggered in programs with children who were very non-functioning. The expectations were low for the children. They expected you to pander to their illness instead of trying to teach them how they would function in the regular world. And I had a problem with that because the world is not going to accommodate themselves for our children. And then at that same time, I had my high school son, who, when I tried to go to his counselor, a Black woman at that, and let her know that I wanted him to take 2 language courses and one of them could work as an elective, I was told, and I quote, "He can take SHOP." And I said, well, we have a straight A student who wants to learn multiple languages. Why on earth would you suggest that he take SHOP? I think we would encourage this. And it was at that time that I started to pull him out of classes in high school and send him to community college for concurrent enrollment. And it was at that time with my younger son that I pulled him out of the preschool program he was in for autistic children. And I started to homeschool at that time. And it was the best decision I ever made. I've homeschooled all of my children since then. And like I said, it's been over a decade.
Okay, so when you had pulled your children out of school and started homeschooling, because when I was a kid, white people were known to do that, not so much Black people. What was the response to maybe some, family and friends when you chose to do that?
Really negative. It was a very negative response. A lot of people were worried about socialization. And my response when people bring up socialization is it is a false socialization that children get in schools. Number one, the schools provide an environment where you're in a classroom with 20 to 30 kids that are your exact same age, 20 to 30 people that are your same age. And there is no social setting that we experience in the real world that is akin to that. So it's a false sense of socialization, but socialization was a big one. What curriculum I was going to use was asked a lot. And that's a difficult question because obviously we have European-centric curriculum in the schools, and the schools are indoctrination stations, right? So when people start asking you what curriculum that has been approved by the status quo that you're going to use, that was also a barrier. And just the general weirdness of it. Homeschool kids are weird. Will they be able to get into college? Are they going to learn what they want to learn? Do you have the aptitude to teach them what they need to know? So it was definitely a grilling session. When I started, it was not as common, even in California, to homeschool. So when I started, there were a lot of like weird looks, and in the Black community, being the only parent that I knew that was homeschooling, I definitely received a lot of pushback.
So why do you believe that a lot of Black people want to entrust our children's education to people who show us every year that they don't like our children's hair, they don't like our children's presence, they have, police, what we call race soldiers, in there just harming our children? I know just a story the other day that a cop had choked out a teenage child in a school in Camden. It's called Camden Fairview High School in Alabama. Why do we keep sending our children to an area that they're not only being miseducated, treated different, thrown in special education when nothing is wrong with them? Why do you think we keep doing that? Because it seems like we trust them so much more than we trust ourselves.
Yes. And I think that's by design, honestly. A big problem with adults in the Black community is that we have to have a decolonization of the mind. We don't recognize, we go into schools and there was an agenda put forth. So if we just look at our history as Black peoples, we know that Black countries, when we look at Africa, were divided up during the Berlin Conference. And part of the agenda that they put forth when they divided Africa amongst the European nations, and within 50 years executed that division, part of that agenda was the Darwinic plan. And part of the Darwinic plan, as a part of natural selection as these races saw it, was that weak cultures are delimited and strong cultures impose their culture upon the weak. So those cultures grow. So we've been indoctrinated into the dominant culture. And because we've been so heavily indoctrinated and our minds are very colonized, it is hard for us to conceive that we don't go along with the status quo. So anything that goes against what we're taught, anything that goes against what we've been indoctrinated to believe, anything that is contrary to our level of conditioning, we struggle with. And I don't think that we fully appreciate how deep the conditioning of our people is. And I don't think that we fully appreciate how it manifests itself in our choices and our ideologies. I think a lot of people believe themselves to have surpassed a point or be woke, but I think that we don't give enough credit to what, depending on your school level, the first, 12 years of school, or if you've gone to graduate school, et cetera, I don't think we give enough credit to how that molds our minds and shapes and gives us faith, right? And that was something else to teach people. That was part of that point, that Darwinic kind of point that they were trying to push forth when they colonized Africa and, removed our people and brought them into a white environment. Part of that also was to make us very patriotic, right? And so anything that pushes back against that conditioning, I think we struggle with it, and we don't understand why we struggle with it. We simply know that it's been done this way. Why would you change the way that it's done, right? It worked for me. It worked for me. Why would you do something different?
So even at the harm of our children, Irene, you're saying that we're conditioned so much to give our children to white people for 8 hours a day that we can see whatever they do to us. You see they're touching children, having full-fledged relationship with children, even within their own community. And a person would normally say, well, I don't want my kid in that environment. So you're saying we that condition that we throw away common sense?
Absolutely. And not only do we throw it away, we feel that they are the authority on our children. So we know, for example, ADHD, let's just take that for example. We know that, well, maybe we all don't know this, but white children, white boys specifically, are medicated most and are diagnosed most with ADHD. So there's a concentrated effort to kind of swing that tide and bring Black children into that fold of medicated children. And although any parent knows that there's behavior that's normal amongst our children, if a white person or a person who's degreed by a white institution tells us that there's something problematic about our child, we will often feed into that. We'll often sit our children in front of a television where there are, the screen is flipping every few seconds, and then we become frustrated when they have attention issues and inability to pay attention, which is, compounded with just the fact that they're a child, but also the fact that we've not just given them over to the schools, but given them over to every mode of conditioning that society has to offer. And so when our children react to that in a normal way, right, which often is through dysfunction, then we look for the very same people that cultivated these problems to then tell us what the solution is and what is wrong with our child, not realizing it's that contact that's the problem. But again, despite the fact that we see people would rather see you not teach your own child then you send your child to a school with utter strangers. I mean, you don't know these people. All you know is that some institution has said they're fit to take care of your child. We wouldn't do that with anything else in our life. You would never give your child's teacher the pins to your bank account or access to your assets. We would never do that, but we give our most important asset over to them without a problem, our children. We don't blink twice at it, despite knowing that, as you said, they are prone to raping children. They are prone to drugging children. I side-eye putting our children in their institutions because while they are there, the institution can usurp your authority as a parent. That's where social workers, psychotherapists, and every manner of individual that does not have your child's best interest at heart has access to your child without your consent. And yet, despite knowing all this, yes, we still take our children there. We still feel them to be the authority. We still trust them more than we trust ourselves oftentimes with our own kids.
Right. And that story that we was kind of discussing, before we got started about the little girl who had a temper tantrum and they put handcuffs on a little Black girl and they put her in a psych ward for 3 days away from her mother it goes everything you're saying right now. I mean, like, this is crazy that we're sending our children to these people, but yet we complain about them being racist.
Yeah, that story angered me. I could not imagine being a mother in that position. I don't know, for those of you who are not familiar with the story we're talking about, there was a little 6-year-old girl. She was having some sort of tantrum, a meltdown, as 6-year-olds will do in class. And so they thought the school had hired a social worker. And that social worker, in the state when they are in, you can involuntarily, apparently, commit children as young as 2 without parental consent for 48 hours. So they took the child out of the school without the consent of the parent and directly to a psych ward where she was then given psychotropic drugs. I mean, we don't know what could have happened to that little girl while she was, out of it and on drugs, a 6-year-old child. That is appalling. And I think we don't appreciate when we bring our children into these state-funded institutions that you are handing your child over to the state and the state becomes responsible for them while they are there. And you are essentially alleviating your rights as a parent and handing those over to these people in the schools, a lot of which don't like your kids on site, don't view your children as children on site. I mean, the idea that somebody would think to send a 6-year-old to a mental hospital is beyond me. I was so angry. I was so angered, and it just made me feel like we really have to reconsider where we're putting our children. I know there's so many reasons people give why they can't homeschool. A lot of people don't feel they're capable. A lot of people don't feel they have the time. They don't have the support system. But if the alternative is that, what this mother experienced, then it may be time to readjust our priorities.
Correct. Because, I just couldn't imagine being that parent. And, I believe that as a parent, we need to make sacrifices for our children. And, you know, I've seen white folks move their kids away from school districts and sell a house just because a bunch of black folks came into a particular school, okay, off of hatefulness. But why can't we as black people either start homeschooling, or like what I would suggest is let's pool our resources together and build the schools for our children, because, you know, that way we can hire teachers. We can do whatever we have to do. For instance, like my little girl, you know, she goes to a black school. This school is, you know, definitely ran by the Nation of Islam. They don't push the nation on nobody. It's no different like a Catholic school. It's a religious-based school. And we had one of our subscribers here, Irene. I'm very proud of this sister. She moved all the way from Puerto Rico to Houston to bring her little girl to that school. And she talked to me the other day while we was in an event, and she says, my little girl is so happy here. He said she's never been this happy in her life. And I was just shaking my head. I was like, I just want all our children to be in this, you know, this kind of environment where you got black teachers, you see black parents, no, you don't see dysfunction going on. It's just an awesome thing to see our children learning in a peaceful environment.
Yeah, I agree. And also just the compassion that we have for our children, and more that we care if our children actually learn. Any parent that has their child in a public school definitely knows that a lot of times the children are pushed through with the inability to read at grade level, with the inability to do math at grade level or above. They don't care. They will push them through, and they will have learned nothing. We have children that enter community college or college level who can't test in, or who have to do remediated classes because nobody cared, right, through the K through 12 years to ensure that they actually understood and were capable of actually handling the data sets that they were given to learn. I think that is a big part of it. And another big part of it is culturally speaking, being able to be taught history, being able to have, because I think we don't understand how indoctrinating even just textbooks are, right? So we are taught history from a white person's perspective. In textbooks, they've become like advertising statements in the newer textbooks. And every time they bring up anybody, it's normally a white person, or just using word problems, right? The names that are used. All of these little things kind of build up over the course of time. So even just having teachers that look like you, right? That love you. I know, you know, being able to hear something like Black Power in a classroom setting, and for people to mean that, or for a child to come in wearing an afro and have several people tell them how beautiful that is and mean it. Those things are things that build a child up on an emotional level that are completely lacking in these public schools where their hair is demonized. They're not viewed as children, right? They're viewed as small adults, because Black kids can't really be children. They're always expected to underachieve. Nobody cares if they underachieve, where they are often kicked out, where there's no actual contact with the parent or support system for the parents outside of the classroom setting. All of those things are lacking. So I definitely think the experience in a school where your environment is Black and that focus is on supporting children as young Black children, I think that's essential.
Yes, it is. And our children are dealing with so much, you know, and it's just like for me, when my little girl was, you know, about to go to school, and we have a school literally right around the corner, you know, where we live. And a little white boy brought a knife to school. 5-year-old white boy brought a knife to school. And that's supposed to be the school my little girl's supposed to go to. And Sister Sadia, you know, shout out to her. She's been telling me forever, hey, you know, when she go to school, take her to this school over here. And once I heard that, I said, Sister Sadia, I don't care how much I got to drive and how much I got to pay in Beltway toll fees. I am taking her to that school. And like I said, that was the best decision ever. And, you know, like I said, we really got to get serious about our kids' education. Seriously.
I agree. I feel that if parents are looking toward supporting each other, and if parents are looking for a support system, to be able to teach their children at home, that there are definitely options available. I mean, you spoke of finding a school that's ran by the Nation of Islam in your area. I know for my children, they attend an online program with the Xyayx Institute where they are heavily supported. And I think that all of those things are essential, even for parents who feel like they don't have the time. I know for what we do, and I teach the history class there, what we do is we have parents that have working hours and their children either go into the institute if they're in the Brooklyn area, or they are able to participate in the classes with our children during the day. And so that kind of alleviates that, even for, house mothers who have to work around the house or have, stay-at-home jobs that they do. That gives them that interaction they need, and that gives them just that Afro-centered learning that they need and that support that they need. And I think that that is essential, that we have to find workarounds and not automatically think this is something that cannot be done. I went to private school growing up. Your child goes to a private school. Obviously, everybody cannot fork out the money for that. But again, that there are many options, and we need to be searching for those options and attempting to move our children out of these white spaces so that, number one, we can support these institutes, right? Because if the children aren't there, right, then it's hard to keep these institutes around. We know in the Carolinas, there was an all-Black school, I believe for boys, that was being shut down just last year because of a lack of parental support. So as a community, if we recognize these problems, we have to be putting our children in these spaces, supporting these schools so that we have options, right? It used to be after segregation ended, all of our options for placing our children in Black schools were taken away. And we need to start rebuilding that infrastructure so that people can have access. And that's going to come through community participation and movement, migration of our children from their schools into our own.
Yeah, so it seems like you have presented a solution for people, because people say, well, I don't have a school in my area, but you're saying through the Xyayx Institute that their children could start being homeschooled?
Yes. So each parent would follow the laws according to their state, which the founder of the school, he delves into that with each parent individually. And what your child would do, let's say if you're not, again, in the Brooklyn area, which is where the brick and mortar institution is, the classes are staggered classes. So what I mean by that is, remember I was talking about earlier, when we talk about socialization, it's often in an artificial setting where all the kids 30 deep are the same age. These classes are more widespread. So it's like a K through 2 class. It's an intermediate class. It's a pre-college class. So there's a wide range of ages and an overarching curriculum being taught so that the younger kids are given help and opportunities to be exposed to more challenging work alongside the older kids. And then older children, often coming out of public schools, who are very remediated in what they know because they weren't taught in public schools, get that brush up to build confidence to do that accelerated work. And it simply requires a computer, right, and an internet connection, and the willingness to allow your child to participate. And they're given a unique Afro-centered curriculum. They're taught to the standards that are going to appease every state. We actually teach an accelerated curriculum. So it's a STEM-based program. So there's also simple, like right now they're doing simple wiring, engineering, other STEM-focused programs that the children participate in. And so that is an option for people if you don't have a school in your area, or if you cannot afford to send your child to a private school that's in your area. This is a way, because although there is a fee that we would like the parents to pay, the school's very good at working with parents who cannot. So your inability to access funds doesn't mean your inability to access the program, right? We would love for, obviously, the parents to contribute because that helps us keep the program growing, but we try to embrace as many students as we can. because it's not about finances, right? It's about teaching our babies. That's the goal of the program. So it's definitely an option for parents who don't feel capable, right? If you're not sure you can do it, if you don't have a Black school in your area that you can take your child to, or if you want to try to homeschool, but you just would prefer to have support. And there's also a mother's group. So there's support for the families outside of the school. And so we all stay in a group chat on WhatsApp with each other. We have meetings with each other. We're able to, if there's issues with parental acceptance, like the grandparents, right? The parents of the parents, or familial acceptance of your choices, we're there to share experiences. And if there's issues with the children, the teachers are very available. And it's just an environment that's more holistic, right? It's not just about sending your child into a place to be taught, but it's about building a community amongst ourselves that is a network for our children, where we're looking at each child individually, each family's needs individually, and addressing those in a communicative way that we simply don't get in public schools, at least not without threats, right? When your child is in a public school and they see a problem with your child, everything becomes a threat, right? We're going to do an IEP, and then this is a threat. If your child does not achieve this, if your child does not do this, then. Whereas in this environment, it is more about being supportive and working for the betterment of each individual child. I think it's an excellent option for parents who are looking to homeschool, who haven't really found a way to delve into that in a way that's safe and is going to be applicable to their state. So yes, the children would technically be homeschooled because it is an institute. It's not a school, but it would be our teachers, right, at the institute, and our curriculum that your child would use.
Okay, and you stated that you also teach with the institute as well, correct?
Right. I do the social studies class for the pre-college and the intermediate group. Okay.
So what I would say to this, many of you, you have watched our videos, you get mad about, when they one of our children cut their hair, all the different things that happen to our children. And for many of you, if you have school-age children and you're still sending your child to public schools where you're dealing with all those issues and problems after watching this channel, for some of you have been watching this channel multiple years, I don't know what to tell you, but Irene has came on today and provided a solution to pull your precious child out of public school. Now, some of you may say, well, my child does sports. Well, there's AAU. You can do AAU. There's a lot of leagues that they have outside. And do you realize when it comes to sports, the coaches now go look more to outside sports than they do high school, because a lot of time high school sports is so much politic. And then on some of these events, things like track, like indoor track, you can run unattached. So what I mean by that is, because some parents may say that, Irene, oh, my child, they in sports, so this and that and the third, so I got to put them in that. No, you don't.
Yeah, I think also too, and I had a child that did track and field, cross country, wrestling at the varsity level, and swimming. So I understand the sports aspect of it. But I think a lot of times we also too have to think bigger. And by bigger, I mean that our people are in a place where we really need to invoke some revolutionary mindset. And that's really going to start with the fact that while sports are great, and I think extracurricular activities are essential, they really are, I think what's more important is that we're foundationally laying a blueprint for us to develop healthy children that are capable of competing in a global society. We are in a global society right now, and our children are not going to compete by being good in sports. They're going to compete by being good programmers, right? They're going to compete by being competent in geography. They're going to compete by being competent in mathematics. I have a child, again, just use my eldest child as an example, who studies 5 languages, who went to school in Japan. And before I sent him to school in Japan, he attempted to get a scholarship that was offered, and it was a global scholarship. And the thing was, he did not get that scholarship. Why? Because mathematics is so intensive and heavy. And while he was a winner, right? Top of his class in a public school. It was not enough to compete globally with those students who were going out for that scholarship. I don't think we appreciate that. Again, whilst extracurricular activities are important to round a child out, number one, the type of extracurricular activity is what's going to make your child competitive, depending on what you're looking for your child to do. If you're looking at your child going to a graduate school, et cetera, they're not looking for basketball, football, track and field. They're not looking at those sorts of activities when we think extracurricular, as far as making our child's portfolio look rounded for a secondary education or for graduate education. They're looking more at things that mostly white kids do, right? So they're looking at things like horseback riding. They're looking at things like being on a row team, things like that. So we need to understand the game in that sense too. So if we're not talking about extracurricular activities for competition as to get into entry into their higher level schools, then we're talking about extracurricular activities simply for the fun of your child, right? Because anything less than that is not going to benefit them the way the system is set up. And we do need to understand how the system is set up. But also we have to recognize that moving extracurricular activities, again, not saying they're not important, but moving them to the side, that it is revolutionary. And that's why we have the term woke, right? Woke assumes that at some point you didn't have an understanding. It is revolutionary when we as adults get an understanding. And wouldn't it be nice to just raise generations of children where it's not revolutionary for them to understand things we're just starting to understand as adults, for them to simply grow up with an understanding of how the status quo works, for them to have an intimate, because moving out of just the core curriculum, financial literacy, an understanding about how the government works, how you can infiltrate and make the systems work for you, an understanding from childhood about Black economics, communal economics, how that needs to play out, instilling from them from childhood how we want to build them up to go out to create an infrastructure, right, of individuals who are involved in various fields and who have various sects of entrepreneurship that will build up a framework for the Black community that we currently don't have, something we're trying to get back at one time that we had because we were forced to have it, right, because of segregation, but that we voluntarily do now. We can't lay that framework, and I don't think we appreciate how the children are our future. White people, the status quo, I should say, the status quo, have a particular term for human beings. It's called human capital, right? And there's a whole office of human capital. And the school systems are a part of that. And they consider educating your children an investment in maintaining the status quo of this country. We need to start looking at our little ones as human capital and recognize that outside of us wanting them to kick or throw a ball, that we need to lay a foundation mentally in them that will allow them to build and maintain the status quo and vision that we see for our diaspora. And I think this is essential. And I want to say this too. There are children who travel out of the country. I have a student that's going to Ghana in a few weeks, and they still participate in our program. So this is not something that's limited just to children that are here in the United States. This is something that throughout the diaspora, our children can participate in. And I think that's really important that I say that we're looking at the well-being and the growth of our Black children globally, and be clear that when we talk about that, we're talking about all of our children throughout the diaspora, and even that ability to have interaction with children across the diaspora and understand that we have a unified plight, and we need to place our children in a position that from the youngest ages, the connection and the dedication to our community and to building our community, that we instill that in them young. That's why we have such a hard time with group economics and things like that. We're not taught group economics for our community. We're taught to participate in group economics for the wider community. And this is stunting us. So forget, again, I want the kids to have fun, but we have to stay focused on the mission. And the mission is not just about extracurricular activities, right? There's a bigger picture.
Right. But look, I'm a firm believer of you can have it all. You can have the Black-centered education. And if your child is good at something, because I know some parents, I just know what I'm telling you, some parents that'll make or break them, believe it or not, it will. So what I'm trying to do is provide a solution to that. So it says no excuse that you got to send your kids to those environments. So with that being said, Irene, could you give us the website and how do people sign up? Because some people may get interested and say, you know what? I didn't watch too much of this. I'm ready to start homeschooling my child. I want to save my child from the clutches of the white supremacists in school. So how can they do that?
Yes. For those of you who are interested in having your child participate in the program, you can go to the Xyayx.com. That's Xyayx.com. Let me spell that again. It's Xyayx.com. And you can enroll or apply to enroll your child there, and somebody will contact you. And also, I want to say that the Institute also has a GoFundMe page. And so you can go to the Xyayx Institute's GoFundMe page as well and donate if you'd like to donate. If you are interested in volunteering, we accept both virtual volunteers and in-house volunteers. Obviously, there's a criteria for that. I want to say this as well. We are always looking for donations that are not cash donations. So if you are able to donate supplies, I know something from the teaching side for me as an online teacher, we want to be able to have computers, little laptops at every station for the kids. It just makes them easy. It makes it easier for them to participate, projection equipment, things like that. So there are so many things that we need. If you're in the Brooklyn area and you'd like your child to attend in person, we're working on getting a larger building, but I believe there's still space in the building that we are currently in. So you are welcome to come by the Institute, right? Give us a call, set up something to come by the Institute so that you can see on the ground what we're doing. And if you're interested in how the classes run, sometimes the classes do come up and we post them online. And obviously, as parents, as teachers, we are open to talk with any potential parents that are interested. So I encourage you, again, it is Xyayx.com for those of you who would like to apply for your child to hopefully participate in the program. That's Xyayx.com. And then you can just go to the Institute's portion of the website and put in an application there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll make sure to put those links in the pinned comment. But this particular, interview has given an option for those who would like to homeschool their parents, because we can't keep complaining all the time about racism and we don't make a move with it. I'm a firm believer that, okay, we know what's going on. Now we need to do what we have to do to protect our children. So Irene, I definitely thank you for coming on the show today and sharing that knowledge and information. You've been homeschooling for a long time. So could, people reach out to you as well to get some advice if they wanted to reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. I'm open to talk to anybody who needs assistance with that. You can contact me at Irene Yvette, IreneYvette, Patreon @gmail.com. That is the email that you guys can contact me at if you have any questions. I'm happy to help wherever I can. If you have any questions about the criteria for your state, you're welcome to contact me as well so that we can navigate that. And also through the Institute, we do the same thing. So yes.
All right. So there's no excuse now. I'm going to keep repeating that because this is a solution-based show as well. And this is a solution to a problem with our children. So Irene, like I said, I appreciate you taking the time out on the weekend to come speak with us, and you be blessed.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much.